All right, we'll get started. I have my slide decks on slideshare.net. If you can't read that too well, you can always get it from me afterwards. So I'll go ahead and get started. Just my standard disclaimers. This is as is. Don't test in production. I'm not responsible if you brick a few machines. So this is not a Microsoft sales pitch. I don't work for Microsoft. This just sets realistic expectations for organizations. All of my group policy slides were taken from a test VM network called DerbyCon. I'm just going to warn you right now, my slide decks are probably worse than the national security agencies. So my talk is really kind of broken up into 4 separate parts. I'm going to be talking about identity protection, data protection, threat resistance, and device security. Really paying more of a focus on the unique things in Windows 10. Sadly, some of the things that are being touted in Windows 10 are only available in enterprise versions of Windows 10. So you need active software assurance licenses, that kind of stuff, to actually get some of these features. Enterprise device protection, that's something that Microsoft has not dropped yet out to the public. So they eventually will. EDP is more of a data leak protection if people are emailing out files that they aren't supposed to be, stuff like that. Also the other unfortunate thing is I get into some of these slide decks, especially if you decide to use like Passport in your organization, you're going to have an Active Directory Federation system and an active PKI environment if you want to start utilizing some of that stuff, depending on how your organization is really kind of set up. I'm not going to get into this, but this is a free tool. It's called Microsoft Security Compliance Manager. You can download it. It's free. Some of my BitLocker sections are really kind of based off of SCM, except I modified them maybe a little bit. But if you're wanting to get into security baselining and just start out, this is a great tool to really download and get into. The other thing I'm not going to get into, but it is available. It was actually published in June of this past year. It's called Microsoft Labs. So if you have administrator accounts that are enabled in your environment and you wish to rotate them, and for some reason or another you just don't want to disable them, this is a tool to really kind of check out too, that's supported by Microsoft, that'll securely rotate passwords in your organization. So the first thing I'm going to get started with is Microsoft Passport. Passport is meant to replace passwords with 2-factor authentication. So basically you're enrolling a device with a Windows PIN, and you have the option to force the use of a hardware security device such as a TPM chip when you're setting up your policies. Once I start getting into these, you're probably going to notice that Passport and Windows Hello may not be practicable for some of your organization's environment. So this is just one of those things, just kind of pay attention to, be aware. So one of the first things, and I'm sorry, this is really blurry. Again, you can download my slide decks afterwards. So you're going to have a couple choices if you want to do key-based authentication or if you want to do certificate-based authentication. Well, if you're in an Azure AD environment, key-based authentication is relatively easy to set up. But if you start moving into organizations where you want to do Active Directory on-prem, then you're going to need a 2016 domain controller along with System Center R2 Configuration Manager and ADFS on top of all that as soon as you start rolling this out. And then, the tail end of this slide gets more into Azure AD subscriptions. If you run an Azure AD hybrid environment, some of that stuff requires more of a PKI infrastructure. So one of the biggest things when you're setting up Passport policies, you do have the option to use a hardware security device. You can force users to use Microsoft Passport for work. as soon as they sign in for a Windows 10 device for the first time. You can set minimum pin links. You can set 6, 8, however much you want to really set it. Just be aware that you're setting up a pin. So whenever you're authenticating into your Active Directory environment, it's using a tokenization to actually connect into AD. So if you cut your pin link short, say 6 characters, an attacker is still going to need the physical device before they can actually log in as that user. So this is a really just kind of a breakdown of how this works. A user unlocks the workstation, or they enroll into a brand new device, and they kind of get an out-of-the-box experience. The identity provider, and I'm going to show you this here in a minute, whether it's Azure or Active Directory, it's going to dump out an authentication token to you. And then with regards to intranet sources, if you use ADFS, it's going to help you single sign on into those types of areas. So one of the first things that you get into whenever you get into an out-of-the-box experience is it's going to ask you whether your device belongs to an organization. And this example is just using the most simplistic one, which is Azure. So I'm going to join on my Azure AD environment. And the next thing it's going to ask me is, hey, you need to create a work pen. Okay. How do you want to create this work pen? Because I need to identify who you are. So I'm going to select to send a notification to my Authenticator app. And all this is kind of in Azure, so it already knows who I am. I've logged in with my correct credentials in Azure. And then it dings my phone with my Authenticator app, and it says, okay, do you go ahead and approve this request? Hit accept. Okay, I've just properly identified myself with another personal, I guess, device, if you will, in order to create a work pen. So I'm going to set up my pen that's based upon my group policies, and that's going to be done. So in a nutshell, that's how Microsoft Passport works. So if you decide to roll out something like that, just be aware that there's a ton of other stuff involved with it as well. So I'm going to go over some fascinating headlines real quick about encrypting data, because encrypting data absolutely pisses me off whenever I see some of these basic things that organizations can do to stop some of this from happening, whether it's a laptop that was stolen from a car and an employee decided to lift off some social security numbers so that they could just kind of work out from home or whatnot, and then the laptop gets stolen, and then there's just a whole other set of things that go in motion on top of this. So same deal with stolen thumb drives that get data copied remote or physically from the device, and then the user takes it home, they forget about it, they lose it in an airport, whatnot. This kind of stuff you can actually protect with BitLocker with Windows 10. You can actually even do it from Windows 8. You can do it from Windows 7 Enterprise. Enterprise came with BitLocker. So I'm going to kind of expand on some of those. This is probably my favorite when we get FBI anti-terrorist officials that are saying we should prevent encryption above all else is just absolutely silly. So as organizations migrate to Windows 10 Pro or Enterprise, you guys, there's other full disk encryption solutions that are out there, because I think organizations are going to be very, I guess, more adoptive of Windows 10 Pro, since they've changed a lot of things that users just hated in that type of environment. BitLocker is natively available. If you have legal obligations to report on encryption, you're going to need products such as like MBAM. There's other products out there like Landes that can report on encryption statuses of devices. So if you have a legal obligation where you need to prove that that device was encrypted, you're going to have to add some other stuff into this mix as well. Again, legitimate companies rely on strong unbreakable encryption technologies, not just the terrorists. So any talk about backdoor encryption is just plain wrong. So I'm gonna go through these next three slides on how to do full disk encryption, and then kind of move down to where you can do removable media encryption if you allow it in your environment. Again, like I said, enterprise data protection will be in an additional module that's not BitLocker, but if you want to do basic DLP whenever people are attaching stuff to like emails and so forth. So this slide deck, again, I apologize that you guys even in the front are probably going to have trouble seeing this. This was taken from the National Security Agency's website on Suite B encryption. They recently updated it to I guess what I want to say, they've dumped AES 256. They no longer consider SHA-256 hashing algorithms viable for post-quantum encryption. So my slide decks are going to use SHA-384 hashing and AES 256 RSA keys. So one of the first things that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to publish a root CA. If you want to do PKI really on the cheap, there's free tools out there like XCA that's based upon OpenSSL. You can do it that way. If you want a quick and dirty way of getting root CAs published in your organizations. And the reason why that we're really kind of doing this is really for some removable media policies. And I'm going to get into data recovery agents here in a bit on why you need that sort of thing. So again, I've already said this, full disk encryption with Windows 10 is no difference from 8. You need to be careful because the default encryption algorithm for BitLocker is AES 128. You're going to need to bump that to 256. Also, you don't want your users really kind of dictating whether they want to do use-spaced only or full. So internally, if you have any type of internal disk wiping processes, you're unsure about those, you never want to do encrypt use space only. Just do full. It'll do the disk full end to end. This is just an example of the group policy that allows full encryption. This is an example of a policy that's use space only encryption. You don't want to do those. So what I'm going to get into here in the next upcoming slides is like how to prevent direct memory access attacks as you roll out BitLocker in your organizations. This also supports smart cards, AES 256 supported for OS fixed disks, removable media. You can do pre-boot authentication. Again, this is not a sales pitch. This is just some of the things that I've done with BitLocker and kind of how to lock it down and secure it based really kind of upon these 4 different items, which is boot kits and rootkits, brute force sign-ins, DMA attacks, MRA attacks, all that kind of stuff. So one of the first things that you're going to prevent doing is you're going to prevent the installation of FireWire devices. And you can do this, and this is available in the Security Compliance Manager toolkit. So whenever you export them and import them into your group policy objects, this is going to go along with it by default. So this is good to prevent DMA attacks. So if FireWire exists on a laptop, nobody's going to have access to install devices using that port. Same here with interactive machine logons. Machine account lockout thresholds is set to like 10 invalid attempts. You can move it down to something smaller in group policy. But what that's really going to do is if a laptop is stolen and somebody is trying to brute force a pre-boot authentication screen, after that 10th attempt or whatever, it's just going to shut down on you and it's going to say, hey, too many pin entry attempts. So your laptops are going to get owned if you fail at DMA mitigation. Enable secure boot. Your laptops are probably going to be higher value targets than desktops. So choose wisely whatever you do with pre-boot authentication. So moving on down, This is where I'm setting my AES-256 encryption algorithm. This is where I'm preventing FireWire from being used. I'm also turning off standby states for sleep settings. I don't want somebody to shut their lid down to their laptop and it going to sleep. So, more stuff. So I'm not going to allow BitLocker without compatible TPM chips. That's going to be disabled. So this is really good for laptops where I'm going to require a startup pin with a TPM. So that's just going to be required right out of the gate as machines get provisioned with BitLocker. So I'm going to get into next on how we can kind of prevent USB data copying. And don't super glue USB ports. That's just not a good idea. So one of the things I'm doing here with this policy is I'm preventing installation of removable devices. That's going to be enabled. And then I'm going to go on down where I'm setting my removable storage access. And you can do this by user or machine, depending on how you move stuff around in Active Directory. So I'm basically going to say, hey, I don't want people direct access with remote sessions such as RDP and that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to tell everything, hey, deny read, write, and execute access for CDs, DVDs, removable disks, WPD devices, such as if somebody uses a cell phone and they attach it in. I'm also going to prevent the usage of OneDrive for storage. I don't want people getting out there. So one of the things that I don't do on here is I don't set it up to do read at. I do set it up where people can read CDs, stuff like that. So moving on down, I'm setting up my removable data policies. So I'm going to allow BitLocker data recovery agents, and there's going to be a reason for that, and I'm just going to go ahead and flip through it because I'm going to be running out of time here before too long. There's a reason for that. I want users that plug in, if they do have access to do so, if they plug in USB sticks, I want them to have two options. Either if they don't want to encrypt the drive, it's going to be read-only. Or the other option is to encrypt it, and it's going to do full end-to-end encryption. Those should be the only two options that users should even have. They shouldn't have anything else. So we make it real simple because we're using data recovery agents. All the end user has to do is a password that is applicable to your environment. So you can set what you want it to be, 6, 8 characters, letters, numbers, spaces, symbols, all that good stuff. The last thing that you want to do is you want to allow users to apply BitLocker protection, but you don't want to allow users to suspend or decrypt BitLocker connections using removable media. So this GPO right here is going to help with some of that. So next one I'm going to get into is just some PowerShell. You can do a manage-BDE-status and get a full outlook of like how my USB is encrypted. It's 100% encrypted. It's encrypted with AES-256. Probably going to notice here I have an identification field called DerbyCon. That's really important to use with data recovery agents, because data recovery agents are only going to work if you have identification set up with your group policies. So how do I know that? Well, if you dig down further and get into protectors, one of the things I'm going to see here is I'm going to see a certificate thumbprint. And a normal user, that's really not going to mean anything. For an admin that has the private key to this thumbprint, you're going to be able to actually unlock the data without knowing their password, because it's going to be inevitable where somebody's going to come in and they're going to tell you, hey, I forgot my password, but I really need the data off this. So that's really the reason why data recovery agents, you should probably do them on a removable media. Again, I don't use anything less than a SHA-384 hashing and an RSA 4096-bit key. Don't make that private key exportable on any admin system. You want it locked down to just specific devices, and that's it. So moving on down, that's just the identification fields. It's very important for DR agents. If you need to set one up, you have to set your key usage up with key encipherment, and then your application or your extended, I guess, key policies with as a key recovery agent, BitLocker drive encryption, and BitLocker data recovery agent. This is group policy. I know you guys aren't going to be able to see that too well. I don't know why they're not coming through okay. This is where I set up my DR agent. And this is more stuff on how to unlock using those certificates. So I'm going to do a manage BDE-unlock on the E drive. And then I'm going to specify a certificate thumbprint. And then that thumbprint that I had in the previous slide, I'm going to execute that PowerShell. And that's going to automatically unlock my volume for the E drive. So a few other things. I'm not going to get into it real depth, but you know, Microsoft Edge is available. A lot of high security organizations are going to have a tough time migrating to that. Edge doesn't support certificate enrollments at all. It doesn't know what the hell it is. So if you have a PKI set up, or even something as simple as if you're trying to enroll a certificate for SMME encryption, it's going to fail. Unfortunately, I'm still suggesting orgs stick with 11 with Emmet, or set up Google Chrome for work, one of the two. We're still having, I'm still seeing remote code executions with Microsoft Edge. We've had two between August and September. Here we kind of see, this is out on Komodo's website. We see right here that it's not allowing us to drop private keys at all. So that's why Edge is just going to be an issue. These are all just group policies that you can set up with Edge. They're very small. I think there's maybe a handful of like 10. So this is probably one of the more important ones, because a lot of people have been complaining about Windows 10 privacy on disabling telemetry. Well, you can disable telemetry just fine with Windows 10 Enterprise, but the problem is if you disable it and you're running Windows 10 Pro, telemetry is not disabled. There's actually a registry key that's going to persist under HKey local machine under policies Microsoft Windows data collection. You can write out a policy that just sets that to 0, and that'll go ahead and kill telemetry on Windows 10 Pro machines. So finally, just want to talk real quick about threat resistance and device security. This is around Windows 10 Device Guard. Now, Device Guard is really kind of more of a holistic solution because you're basically doing virtualized based security. And unfortunately, you're getting locked into Hyper-V whenever you do that sort of thing. Along with that, whenever you actually start setting up policies for Device Guard, you have the option to add the following components, such as isolated user mode, credential guard, inside group policy. Those are easy wins, but they really kind of it locks you into Hyper-V, which I hate that. Credential guard is great for mitigating past the hash, and I'll show in a couple slides here on how that mitigates once you have a hypervisor really kind of set up for it. IUM really kind of protects you against admin and kernel level malware, and of course you need to configure code-based integrity with all that. So you're going to need a physical machine, obviously, for all this. You can't do it in a virtualized environment already, so it's going to need to have a TPM. It's going to need to at least have UEFI 2.3 or 2.4. Device Guard probably isn't going to work for older machines, and you're going to be locked into Hyper-V, so that could be an issue for some. If you actually want to get down and you want to unlock the hypervisor and the isolated user mode, you can go into Windows features, turn them both on, and let them run. Here, all I'm doing here is I'm setting up the virtualization-based security. I'm telling it to, hey, I want to allow secure boot and DMA protection. I want to enable virtualized-based protection of code integrity. That's where you're signing your CIs. So, and then I'm going to enable credential guard. Group policy is short with this. Really kind of the bigger issue with credential guard, and I'll get into that here in my last section. This is NTLM with credential guard. This is NTLM without. So this is a pass the hash fail whenever that's not enabled. So credential guard's probably the easiest thing to like implement. Just to kind of cut this a little bit shorter here, because I only have like 2 minutes left. I wrote out like a lot of pseudocode on what it takes to implement device guard. Man, that is really shitty. Let me, and I apologize for the mirrored display. Yeah, I can't set my resolution any lower. So, but anyway, you kind of get the point to it. I have roughly 141 lines worth of pseudocode to implement device guard. So there's a lot of abstracts that I have out in my slide decks. So I'll put the beginning of the slide deck back out here. But anyway, in my abstracts, I do have implementing Microsoft Passport in your organization. And the other one is the device guard deployment guide. So if you ever look at that, it's going to be an eye opener. Again, I apologize for my resolution here. I know it's been shitty. Thank you all for bearing with me through this presentation. I'll scroll back up here if anyone wants to get a capture of, hang on here, of my slide decks, so you can kind of look at them in greater detail. It is slideshare.net/secret/2S0G5 B J lowercase j U 3 capital F 5 capital N and then O. So I'll leave this up if you guys want to get closer and get them afterwards. Otherwise, the other thing that you can do is you can follow me on Twitter. I will post those on Twitter as well. My Twitter handle is rootsecdev. So again, this is just defense and depth strategies updated with the latest that's out with Server 2016 right now. Thank you.